Okay.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, it might actually be working. Um, Welcome everyone who has joined us this afternoon for this question and answer session with Ancora, who have been absolutely fantastic this week. We've been working together, collaborating to bring a focus week to you on everything to do with clinical trials, because I think one of the main issues for patients, cancer patients, and clinical trials is that we just don't know much about them, and unless our particular oncologist or medical team mention them to us, quite often we just don't know that they're available or that we might even be eligible for them. So today, this afternoon, for the next 30 minutes, we're going to be chatting about clinical trials and putting the questions that have come in from everyone to Danielle. Danielle, can you just introduce yourself to us and tell us a little bit about Ancora, please?
Yeah, it's nice to meet everyone. Sorry you get to see my horrible attempt at gardening in the back. But I'm Danielle Ralic, so I'm the CEO and my horrible camera of Ancora. And I guess just a little bit about me. So I was born in Boston. My parents are Croatian, so I came out quite tall. But my background is in the technical side. So I've been doing business intelligence implementations in healthcare for a decent amount of time. And with that, got into things like AI, natural language processing. And since I was always in healthcare, I kept coming up on healthcare data and all of the challenges that are surrounding it. And so I worked a lot with pharmaceutical companies, with hospitals, and kind of kept seeing all this data and amazing new treatments coming out, but patients and physicians really struggling to be able to access it. And so that's where we started Ancora, which was, I have co-founders who are brilliant on the science side and medical side, and my strength is really on data. So we're a little divided there, but we've been able to put together kind of our experiences and our knowledge. And our aim has been to democratize clinical trial information to make sure that patients and physicians can stay on top of it. And I'm currently in Switzerland, but the accent is unfortunately because of Boston.
Thanks, Danielle. And you mentioned that there's a team of you at Ancora. So there's yourself, Luca, and Emily, who all work together. And it's thanks to the three of you that we've been able to put on so much information about clinical trials this week. It's been absolutely amazing. And we've had fantastic feedback on social media this week. Things are being read on the website. So thank you very much. We've got 30 minutes to have come in from the beginning of the week. And I've got them in front of me. So I think really if we just crack on with those, the first question is what is a clinical trial?
Yeah, great question. I actually also only learned this about 8 years ago, so it's definitely not a common knowledge item as well. So clinical trials are essentially after the point that scientists do their work in terms of finding kind of brilliant new treatments that they think will work for various diseases or targets. They do some animal testing, and clinical trials are the point where we're now testing these investigational treatments in people, of course. And the goal of these trials is to test both safety and efficacy, or how well it works. And we're looking at how well it works kind of period, of course, but a lot of the clinical trials also aim to evaluate how well it works compared to the standard of care, or kind of what's out there today. So we're always looking to move medicine forward. So a lot of the brilliant advances in oncology especially, a lot of those brilliant advances are in trials now, and with the participation of various people and going across the stages, at the end of it, we accumulate the data and evidence to be able to get these trials, or these, investigational treatments approved. And once they're approved, of course, there's still more fun, but then it will be available to the wider population.
So the clinical trial is a cog in the wheel of getting new drugs out to patients effectively. And I should just mention that the people who follow me and who are joining us today and who use my website are mostly cancer patients. So we're sort of focusing on that side of things. So the cancer clinical trials really more than anything else today. So what would you say the risks and benefits are of joining a clinical trial for a cancer patient who is contemplating looking into it in a bit more detail and perhaps with a view to joining?
Yeah, so for patients considering a trial, really the benefits are that the latest advances in science are in the trial. So if you're really looking for kind of the latest in medicine and the latest that's being explored, a trial is a fantastic option for that. As well as the physicians that help support trials, they're usually amazing investigators, and you'll get access to kind of this new slew of medical professionals as well, which can be a wonderful asset as well. And a lot of the trials sponsors, they're called sponsors because they sponsor the treatment, which is important to know. So that can be a benefit as well, especially if you're paying for a lot of medicine on your own. And I just like to bring in a quick little story. Kind of the reason why I actually wanted to work on a project like this was that I've had a lot of family and friends go through cancer, and you see how terrible some of the treatments are in terms of side effects, and they're quite harsh. And some of the new medicine in oncology is working to reduce side effects and be more targeted. And so I was helping investigate kind of friends and family to find those options. And I think in oncology, that's one of the best benefits of these new treatments in trials. And the kind of my starting point for this journey with Ancora was hiking and meeting a stage 4 lung cancer survivor who was alive today and out hiking because he participated in a trial. And I just thought that was absolutely incredible. So I think there are a ton of benefits to being able to join a trial. But of course, there are risks. And for each trial, the risks can be different. But I think the most important thing to know is that these risks must be explained to you as a participant to the trial. So the person leading the trial will walk you through the risks of that trial and make sure that you understand, and that's a process that's called informed consent. So they have to tell you all of the risks. And of course, kind of the standard ones are you might not respond to the new treatment. It is investigational. There may be side effects that occur, of course, and you may not get the treatment of choice. So if the investigational treatment is being compared to a placebo, then you may get the placebo, which for cancer is usually the standard of care. So those would be the main risks.
And you mentioned informed consent. And so when someone joins a trial, they have to sign something to say that they've been told all of this. But is it possible then to leave the trial if you've started on it? Are you then stuck on it, or can you leave? Is there any flexibility there?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you feel uncomfortable or you just don't desire to participate any longer, it is absolutely in your right to stop at any point. So they cannot hold you or lock you into the hospital.
And it's across the board, all trials, because obviously I'm based in the UK, you're in Switzerland, there's an American angle as well, because there's definitely interest from the States in your product. So across the board, that's the case, is it?
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Okay, the next question is that if clinical trials are such a great option, given the benefits that you've just mentioned, why have none of my doctors ever mentioned them to me? That's a question that's come in.
Yeah, unfortunately, clinical trials are very tedious in terms of the information that is involved with a trial. And just as an example, with precision medicine, you may have heard of people talking about genetic mutations. And there's quite a lot more data being added to considering the trial, and some of that criteria. So it's a lot for a physician to stay on top of. And unfortunately, physicians don't have that much time with a patient or to be able to go and explore this. And if you're ever feeling crazy, you can go to clinicaltrials.gov and just search for breast cancer and look at it in the UK, and you'll see quite a few documents and this massive amount of information. So it's just unfortunate that for both patients and physicians, this information is really difficult to digest and really difficult to stay on top of. And I mean, thankfully, medicine is progressing quite quickly. So that kind of ever evolving landscape does lead to it being more challenging for the physicians to be able to recommend it.
Okay. And so if your physician, your medical team don't mention trials to you, how could someone find out more about trials? So someone who, at whatever stage they are in their treatment or whatever stage of cancer they've been diagnosed with, how could they find out more about trials?
Yeah. There are a lot of resources online for this. So kind of one of the standards is the infamous clinicaltrials.gov database, but it is quite tedious and heavy.
Yeah.
Of course, we're quite selfish, so I would say as well, Ancora.ai.
Which is fantastic, yes.
Thank you, Sarah. We're still working on it.
So I will plug that because obviously I'm talking to someone who is from Ancora, and you mentioning about the Gov Trials website, which I looked at myself and couldn't make any sense of a lot of the information on there as a patient, putting myself in a patient's position. I just didn't understand a lot of the terminology, and a lot of it wasn't consistent either. But then when I looked at the Ancora website, it's much clearer. It's very, very user friendly. It's very intuitive, and it's being created by you guys with the patients in mind, definitely. So, I know we're talking about questions that have come in, but I do want to point out to everyone today that is definitely worth something checking out.
Thank you, Sarah. We're working pretty hard, but if anyone also during this chat does have a chance to review and have any feedback, of course, please do let us know. But what I would like to highlight, I guess, as part of what Ancora is that we used technology plus kind of the fusion of the scientific brains we had available to help restructure and just put a questionnaire so that way, as a patient or even someone taking care of someone, you can easily answer questions that will then tackle the more complicated text available in trials. So we've tried to use technology to be a little bit of a translator between the clinical research world and the patient world. So hopefully you find it helpful as well.
So anyone can find out about trials, as you've just said, and they can look at these different places, including your website. But then the natural next question is who can participate in a trial?
So looking at who can participate is the joys of going through a section called Eligibility Criteria. Sometimes the title of the trial will help kind of alert you to if the trial is at a high level relevant, but the eligibility criteria includes two very important sections. One being inclusion criteria, which is these are the set of criteria that they are specifically looking for in patients. So it may be something like you must be HER2 positive, just in the kind of trend of precision medicine.
Yeah.
And exclusion criteria are things that are kind of the criteria that they don't want participants to have. And it may be for safety reasons, it may be because they don't think kind of these profiles will react to the treatment. So you have to consider both, absolutely, when looking to see if you are eligible.
Okay. So let's say someone has joined a trial and they've been found to be eligible to join a trial. The next question is, will I get a placebo? How do I know whether I will be in the placebo or the control group?
Yes, the placebo. So the placebo, especially in oncology, getting a true placebo is quite rare. Thankfully, there's still ethics in medicine, and patient safety is the most important. So it would be unethical to give a cancer patient no treatment. And so because of that, if you do hear the word placebo, what they might be saying, and you'll usually see the text inside say, as compared to standard of care.
Yeah.
And so standard of care is what will be evaluated against instead of a placebo or no treatment. So I think that's really important to understand for oncology, where no treatment could be incredibly detrimental to your health.
No, that really makes that clear. The next question is, do I have risks if I enroll as a healthy volunteer? I see lots of ads for trials.
Yeah, of course, there are always risks. I would say there are also trials that are simply questionnaires or using an app. So there are certainly some that I would say the risk might be it takes up too much memory on your cell phone. But there are others for healthy volunteers. You've probably heard about vaccines nowadays with the coronavirus pandemic. And of course, there are risks involved. But again, their trials are heavily regulated, and there are quite a strong set of ethics in terms of how trials are set up. And they are set up with the intention to maximize safety. So while there are always risks and there is no guarantee in life in general, the same applies to trials, but do know that there is a lot of process before a trial is published and available to make sure that they can push safety as much as they can.
Yeah, safety is always paramount importance, isn't it? So moving on, the next question is, why should I look for trials unless everything else has failed?
So we mentioned a little bit about kind of the new treatments coming out for trials. So I'd certainly say if you're on a treatment and the treatment is working, a trial that will alter that is likely not a great choice. However, if you've tried other things or before you jump onto a treatment, it is interesting to see trials because of the advances that we've made, especially in oncology in terms of treatments, and they may be available to you. So you may have heard of the words immunotherapy, checkpoint inhibitors, PD-L1 inhibitors. So those are more targeted than some of the standard of care treatments available today. So chemo is kind of spray and pray. And these newer treatments are more targeted. And so that may save you from some of the side effects that a lot of people experience with chemo. So it is highly encouraged to consider the trial before even standard of care, because there may be something that is incredibly relevant to your situation, which could be a better treatment option.
Yeah. And what about cancer patients in the middle of progression? Are there any trials for those cancer patients? So they're either not very early or they're not metastatic. What's your advice on that?
Yeah, absolutely. There are, I think, one of the misconceptions is it's only like a last minute option, or you're stage 4 metastatic. And while yes, there certainly are lots of options on that end, there are quite a few options for also patients in between. It's just sometimes the wording of how they describe the stage can be variable. And you mentioned the consistency fund. There certainly is inconsistency there as well. But that's part of the work we tried to tackle with Ancora, was just how to try to standardize that into stages that patients are more familiar with. So that's some of the pieces that we tried to tackle. But I would say that certainly if you're not stage 4 or really early on, that there still are options.
Right, because that's interesting, isn't it? I think there is, like you say, a misconception that trials really are only available for stage 4 cancer patients, but that's very much not the case.
Correct.
So the next question is, will having had several previous treatments exclude me from participating in trials?
So the fun answer of it depends, but I guess the reasoning behind why some previous treatments may exclude you is that you may have tried a previous treatment that is similar to the treatment being investigated. And so kind of that's a way for them to know, or it's kind of a sense check of if it didn't work for you, like as an example, atezolizumab, then pembrolizumab likely won't work for you.
Yeah.
So some of it can be just because of that similarity. And other times they really want to make sure that the investigational treatment worked. So they like to start kind of from a clean slate, if you will, or like really make sure it was that treatment. So those are some of the scenarios where your previous treatments may exclude you from a trial, but there are certainly trials that have much less kind of limitations around those previous treatments. And this is where kind of stage 4 metastatic, you can find a lot of trials there that aren't so exclusive.
But it shouldn't be something that stops you from looking if you've had previous treatments. That shouldn't stop you from researching and looking into the possibility there might be a trial that's suitable. Okay.
Absolutely.
So the next question is, if I participate in a trial now, will this exclude me from participating in another, potentially more beneficial trial down the line?
So again, it depends, but so there are many people who who have participated in many trials, so it certainly will not like absolutely exclude you from a future trial. So I would say, if the treatment looks great today and you're worried about maybe some advance in 10 years, I wouldn't worry that much about it. But there are some, and again, if it's a similar trial, similar investigational treatment, and that might exclude you from a future trial that is similar. So there are scenarios, absolutely, where it may exclude you, but there are many cases of participants participating in multiple trials. The only caveat is maybe not at the same time, which I'm sure for a patient, you might not also want to be in a trial in many trials. Yeah, one is exhausting enough. So yeah, typically not at the same time, but sequentially, usually you're all right.
And here's a good question. When it comes to rarer cancers, are there any international efforts to recruit patients from anywhere in the world to ensure the numbers in the trial make a statistical significance? As a patient, how can I advocate for something like this to become a reality? It's a really good question.
Amazing. Yeah, so the later stage trials for rare cancers certainly are more international. They have an awareness that there aren't as many kind of potential candidates, so they really do have to look widely across the world and various locations. So I'd say the later stage trials, especially in the for rare cancers, would have a more international view. Also, that being said, I think a nice trick for patients with rarer cancers is if you do have your genetic mutations kind of tested and you're aware of those, the new trend in precision medicine is that now instead of just treating a cancer, we're looking at treatments targeting specific pathways and genetic mutations. And so you can search for your genetic mutation, and some trials will be tumor agnostic, or they'll say across all solid tumors. So that's a way where your specific rare cancer may not be mentioned, but if it's tumor agnostic, that may be a way to participate. And then for the patient looking to kind of advocate and participate and help kind of support these trials, there are fantastic patient registries for rare cancers, and typically those registries are ways to kind of raise your hand and say, I'm here and I'm interested, and when something comes, please tap me on the shoulder. That's a fantastic way to join the efforts, or even contacting R&D sections of those trial sponsors. Some may be in pipeline, so that might be also a great way to get kind of ahead of trial participation and let them know that you're interested.
And would you have a lot of this information on your website, so sort of signposting people to where they might be able to raise their hand effectively? Where would someone find that information out?
Yeah, there are a lot of kind of rare disease groups who do this exceptionally well.
Yes.
So I won't steal their thunder. And a lot of them, have raised the attention of large pharmas or large sponsors. So I'd say this is likely where the internet is probably your best friend and your worst friend. Like, depends on what you find. But for anyone who's looking, we do have great collaborations with some of these groups. So we'd also be happy to help point you to the ones we know.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so moving on to the next question is going back to the risks that you mentioned earlier. The question is, how safe are trials? For example, how large is the risk of unknown long-term side effects?
That is, maybe I can quickly cover the trial phases just so we know where the risks pop up. I think that's also a good one. So the long-term risks are certainly the ones that probably keep researchers up late at night, I think, if I were to say in a quick summary. But with a phase 1 trial, the first thing that you do is look at safety and tolerability of your investigational treatment. So you look at, is it tolerated? Is someone having massive side effects? And that's kind of your phase 1. So it's a very more short-term view. And then as you progress through the phases, that is where researchers will try to get a hold of what is that long-term impact. So your phase 2 will look at how well it's working, while also monitoring side effects, of course. Your phase 3 looks at the treatment versus a comparator, and now they'll start to look a little bit more longer term with the data. And the final one, that's typically where your phase 4, where they will try to monitor the long-term effects for a much longer duration. Some trials can run for years. I mean, not that you go to a hospital every year, but just they might check up on you every year to see how it's going. Mm-hmm. And I know this is one of the concerns for patients that have signed up for CAR T trials. So far, they were fantastic. They've been doing really well, but the long-term effects aren't known. And that's one of the biggest gaps in terms of research. So unfortunately, that's one of those things that does take time. And we just have to see how things happen. And that's probably one of the biggest risks of trials.
Yeah. I'm just conscious of time. It's whizzing by and we've only got 4 minutes left until 5 o'clock. But I have got loads and loads of questions left, which there's no way we're going to finish them all. So what I think I'll do is I'll ask you one more question, and then what we'd like to do, if it's okay with you guys, is we'll put all the questions that we've asked, plus the answers, plus all the questions we haven't asked and their answers into a blog post and pop it up on the website. So everything that's been asked up to this point this week will be answered, even if it hasn't been answered this afternoon. Is that okay with you? So I'll just ask one more question, which I'll whiz through here. Are trials as diverse as the population? I think this is a really good question.
Yeah, we're working on it. Unfortunately, not. Unfortunately, representation on trials has been pretty abysmal, to summarize it in colorful language. And that's one of the goals that we'd love to see something like Ancora, or kind of what we're working towards, is putting more trial information in the hands of people who traditionally might not be aware of trials. But just to give an example of diversity, if anyone wants a good slogan, not too long ago, I think that's probably about 3 decades ago, even women weren't considered really on trials. Women were, quote, boobs and tubes of a man. So this led to a pretty incredible case. It's called the drug Ambien, where they did not test well on women. accidents or other kind of dangerous behavior, and milligrams. And what they found out, and it took 2 decades to change prescribing kind of behavior, was that women metabolize the drug differently. And so we actually needed only 5 milligrams. So that's quite a difference.
That really is. And I can't believe that that was only 30 years ago.
Yeah, this is the 90s. So we have a long way to go. And this is why I encourage really anyone and everyone to participate in trials, because that representation is critical to making sure we're evaluating new treatments for everyone in all populations. So I highly encourage you to participate. I mean, we need you.
No, that's absolutely the message that's coming across. Well, it's 1 minute from you. I would just leave with a couple of messages, which is any patient who's listening to this, watching this, who is considering trials and whether that's something for them, do speak to your medical team as well. That's really, really important. Always talk to your medical team, your oncologist, your physician, whoever it is that's giving you the treatment and sort of setting your treatment plan. That's really, really important. And the second point I want to make is just to direct everyone to your website, which is Ancora.ai, where you can find a whole heap of information about trials. And Danielle and the team have written some really, really helpful guides to clinical trials, which I've put on tickingoffbreastcancer.com. So there's a lot of information out there. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks so much for your time. It was great to chat.
Thank you, Sarah. No, really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.